पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणीं भगवतीम् अष्टादशाध्यायिनीम् अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणीम् नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे पुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्र येन त्वया भारततैलपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवेत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत् वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तन्न विदुः सुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः।
We continue with chapter 2, Sankhya Yoga, verses 15 to 18. Yam hina vyadayanti yete purusham purusharshava samadukha sukham dhiram sa amrutatvaya kalpate. Na asata vidyate bhava na abhavaha विद्यते सतः उभयो अपि दृष्टः अन्तत्तु अनयो तत्त्वदर्शिभिः अविनाशि तु तत् विद्धि येन सर्वम् इदं ततं विनाशम् अव्ययस्य अस्य न कश्चित् कर्तुम् अर्हति अन्तवन्तः इमे देहाः नित्यस्य उक्ता शरीरिणः अनाशिनः अप्रमेयस्य तस्मात् युद्धस्य भारत. That man indeed whom these contacts do not disturb, who is even-minded in pleasure and pain, steadfast, he is fit for immortality, O best of men. The unreal has no being. The real never ceases to be. The final truth about them both has thus been perceived by the seers of ultimate reality. Know that to be indeed indestructible, by which all this is pervaded. None can work the destruction of this immutable being. These bodies are known to have an end. The dweller in the body is eternal, imperishable, infinite. Therefore, O Bharata, fight. I will just remind the verse 14. Contacts of the senses with their objects, O son of Kunti, give rise to the experience of cold and heat, pleasure and pain. Transient they come and go, bear them patiently, O Bharata. That man, indeed, whom these contacts do not disturb, who is even-minded in pleasure and pain, steadfast, he is fit for immortality, O best of men. When you see an ocean, you see the unlimited state of the ocean, and it is not affected either by the inflow of rivers or the process of evaporation. In the same way, a man established in the understanding of the unlimited abundance of absolute existence is naturally free from the influence of the relative order. And this is what gives him the status of immortal life. So Bhagavan emphasizes to Arjuna that once a man has become established in the understanding of the permanent reality of life, his mind rises above the influences of pleasure and pain. Such an unshakable man passes beyond the influence of death and lives in the permanent phase of life, and he attains eternal life. It is the Lord's purpose that Arjuna shall gain the state where he will be above all considerations in the relative field, even death, and all problems of life and death. The whole truth of life is that there is nothing substantial to bind the never-changing to the ever-changing sphere of life. Again, there is nothing substantial to bind the never-changing to the ever-changing sphere of life. And there is nothing to keep them bound together. It is only ignorance of the natural state of freedom existing between these spheres that results in binding them together. This ignorance and the bondage born of it keep life in motion. Again, this ignorance and the bondage born of it keep life in motion, the inner aspect remaining never changing and the outer ever changing. The outer ever changing aspect continues eternally by virtue of the inner. Thus, the life flows onward in the natural state of eternal freedom on the basis of ignorance. Now, at the present time, it is generally found that people try to make a mood of equanimity in pleasure and pain, in loss and gain. They try to create a mood of equable behavior and unaffectedness while engaged in the diverse activities of the world. But trying to make a mood on the basis of understanding is simply hypocrisy. Many seekers become trapped in such an attitude, and this will become clear as we proceed. The true understanding does not become ripe as a result of mood making. It is only necessary to understand the meaning of this and the previous 3 verses in order to live the reality of the relationship between the inner eternal life and the outer ever-changing phases of existence. For example, when once a man knows that he is the king and the state belongs to him, he immediately begins to make use of his relationship with the state. He begins to behave like a king. He is not required to cultivate kingship by practice and by constant thought about his position. Just as a child is not required to remember always that his mother is his mother. He just knows it once and lives the relationship at all times. So simple is the path of understanding which results in freedom from bondage. So here it is important to gain the experiential knowledge and not just create a mood of equable behavior. So this knowledge contained in these verses, the wisdom of Samkhya, it cuts asunder the bonds of ignorance and allows life to be in its natural state of eternal freedom. Now Bhagavan is further elaborating. The unreal has no being. The real never ceases to be. The final truth about them both has thus been perceived by the seers of ultimate reality. So in the previous verse, the permanent reality of life has been explained, and here the indestructibility of the human essence is explained here. So there is the ultimate reality which never changes, and opposed to it is the unreal which is ever changing. So something which is ever changing and which is unreal then has no substance and no real existence. Reality is the basis of the multiplicity of creation. It is the source of the multiplicity of creation, or the unmanifest is the source of all that is manifest. Here the seer of truth perceives clearly the difference between the permanent, never-changing absolute state of life and its ever-changing states of diversified phenomenal existence. The seeker of truth, when he perceives this as the experiential knowledge, it is this which gives him that stability and heightened state of consciousness by which he rises above the binding influence of activity in the phenomenal world. Now we can see Bhagavan is leading Arjuna step by step towards the vision of a realized man. Bhagavan further says, "Know that to be indeed indestructible, by which all this is pervaded, none can work the destruction of this immutable being." The omnipresent being is also referred to as Paramatma, and the spirit within is referred to as Jiva, and some say even Jivatma. When one says the inner spirit, it may be understood in 2 ways. First, as the ego together with the mind and senses, which constitutes the doer and the experiencer, the enjoyer and the sufferer. And secondly, as the dweller in the body, which is the individual aspect of cosmic existence, of eternal being, or the Paramatma. So this individual aspect of this cosmic existence is referred to as the Jiva, or some refer to it as Jivatma. So Jiva then is the individualized cosmic existence. It is the individual spirit within the body. And when its limitations are removed, then Jiva is Atma alone. It is the transcendental being, or the Paramatma. So the Jiva has these two components. The first, which is the ego, together with the mind and the senses, and the second, which is the individualized aspect of cosmic existence. Now we go further. It may be made clear here that the omnipresent being and the spirit within man, they are not two different entities. They are found to be different because of the different individual nervous systems. Just as the sun appears as different when shining on the different media such as water and oil, so the same omnipresent being shining through different nervous systems appears as different forms and then forms the spirit, the subjective aspect of man's personality. When the nervous system is pure, then this being, the Paramatma, reflects more, and the spirit, which is the Jiva, is more powerful and the mind more effective. When the nervous system is at its purest, then this being, the Paramatma again, reflects in all its fullness, and the inner individuality of the spirit, the Jiva, gains the level of unlimited eternal being. So this makes it clear that in its essential nature, the spirit Jiva is undying and omnipresent. It is not different. So this explains the universality of the individuality of Jiva. So if Jiva is the same as the Atma or the Paramatma, then it is indestructible. It is indestructible. So what is impermanent level of life is only to the relative and not to the being. So the conclusion is that from both points of view, that of the permanence of being and that of the impermanent level of life, Arjuna's duty is not to worry about anything, but to rise up and do what he has to do. Now Bhagavan continues, these bodies are known to have an end. The dweller in the body is eternal, imperishable, infinite. Therefore, O Bharata, fight. It is very obvious that at every moment the body is changing. The body of a child is not the body of a youth, and the body of a youth is not the body of an old man. So, if death is inevitably going on, even during what is said to be life, nothing new seems to happen when one body dies and another body is taken. There is no point, therefore, in lamenting the death of the body, and even less in lamenting it in anticipation. So again, the dweller in the body, which is the Jivatma, is the same as the Atma, the eternal being, and it is indestructible. We have understood Jiva is the individualized cosmic existence. It is the individual spirit within the body. When its limitations are removed, Jiva is Atma, the transcendental being, the transcendent being. So when the individuality of the Jiva and the universality of the transcendental self, the Atma, are united and found together on the one level of life, then there is Brahman, the all-embracing cosmic life. So finally we conclude by saying the individual Jiva in its essence is Atma and hence is eternal, imperishable and infinite. This brings an end to the essence of the verses 15 to 18 of Maharshi's translation of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2. I will add a few words. We find that the body and mind continually cease to exist and get recreated. Separate from the body-mind system is our spirit, the Jiva, and that lives on eternally. So the spirit Jiva remains the same throughout our life with no change despite all the changes in the body-mind system. We continuously see that the cells within our body die every day and are reborn over a period of few days to few years. Much of the body-mind system is replaced and renewed. Now it is also a common experience that when you go to the Himalayas and you see some of the sadhus or ascetics, they seem almost naked without even wearing footwear and even minimal clothing, and they seem to bear extreme cold without any discomfort. The process where we perceive or receive information through our five senses and then you analyze or introspect it with the patterns or the samskaras, and you respond in a certain way, then it is called cognition. So this cognition certainly changes with transcendence and actually changes with the rise in the consciousness and also controlling the senses. So we begin to understand that the transcendence, the listening, the introspection and the existence, which we call the transcendence, the Sravanam, Mananam and Nididhyasana, these are the most important aspects for a seeker to rapidly progress and gain this experiential knowledge called Brahma Vidya. It is said in the Upanishads that through avidya, ignorance, you cross beyond mortality, beyond death, beyond change. Through vidya, knowledge, you taste immortality. So we understand the self is always the self. It is never non-self. But somehow it became identified with the body and with the whole objective field of life. Here what we are referring to is the Jiva. It has always been the self, but somehow it became identified with the body and with the whole aspects of life and the samsara. So the I got mixed up with the mind. This I and mind arose from this ego. So when this individual I awakens fully to its original identity, then it understands and knows its immortality. So the whole practice of transcendence is just for this, to awaken to one's own immortal reality. And what is this practice? The practice means we go beyond that with which we have been identified all the time. And what is it that we are identified with all the time? Is this relative, ever-changing phenomena. And we transcend that, and we transcend and transcend. And as Maharishi Ji has said, with time, the taste of transcendental consciousness begins to be a little more lasting, and more lasting, and gradually the long identification with the boundaries of the body and the surroundings begins to dissolve. So all these impressions that we call memories, we call vasanas, we call samskaras, they all begin to melt. So this practice or sadhana is just for the sake of transcending change. So again, this practice or sadhana is just for the sake of transcending change. Through change, you transcend change. And that is why it says, through ignorance, you cross beyond the field of change through ignorance. Because enlightenment is a reality and ignorance is a mirage. For example, it's like you have the glasses on, the eyes, but you're searching and you're saying, where is the self? Where is the self? So the whole search is a kind of fraud, which is just avidya, the ignorance. So the reality is eternity and immortality. The only way you can know immortality is by the virtue of being immortality. You cannot just comprehend it by knowing it, by hearing it or reading it. You have to be on that experientially, be the immortality. But to know this, but to experience this immortality, you have to first cross beyond the boundaries of change. You have to go beyond the boundaries of the change. So you're going through the change, you transcend change. So you gain the immortality by transcending change through change. Again, you transcend until all the boundaries of the body and the surroundings begin to dissolve. Then these impressions begin to melt. What are these impressions? These are called in so many ways. They're called vasanas, samskaras, memories or smriti, and patterns, so on and so forth. So just by thinking that this particular some patterns or impressions have to change, it will not happen. They have to melt. Yes, by introspection and by analyzing and understanding, some things you can make a change and you can stop, but a permanent result cannot happen. So the purnatva, the completion, attaining the perfection, attaining the fullness and the wholeness will only come when all these boundaries melt and these gaps vanish, all this non-aligned becomes aligned, and all this happens only in the consciousness. And this will be a big relief to know that by just raising the consciousness, then one can easily attain the Purnatva. And again, what is rising and what is changing here is in the relative, in the ever-changing field. So the absolute is always full, and now the relative is becoming full. And this is what Maharshi J would always refer to as 200% of life, the inner and the outer. Jai Gurudev. We will continue. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu.